I could have been stuck with anyone in this blizzard if I really had to, but did I really have to be stuck here with Blake? Yes, Blake, my biggest rival. Now it's just the two of us against the storm, and I have no idea what's worse, being stranded or stranded with him. This is what happened. The lobby buzzed with excitement as Riley and I walked in, the warm blast of heat a sharp contrast to the icy air outside. My shoulders relaxed for the first time all morning, until I remembered what lay ahead. "Yay!" Riley announced, tossing her bag exaggeratedly. "Jordan, babe, you've successfully survived the great outdoors! I'm so proud!" I gave her a blunt look. I'm literally just walking into the lobby. Eventually, I couldn't fight the small grin. Save the pep talks for when I actually make it onto the damn slopes. We joined the check-in line. Evan was already up front, animatedly talking the poor receptionist's ears off. His gestures were wild enough to be visible even through the wild crowd gathered around the desk. "Bet you $10 Evan's asking for room updates," Riley said. "Only if it comes with snacks," I replied. "You know how his primate brain works. Work, snow, snacks, repeat." She laughed. Soon, Evan spotted us and waved so excitedly that I thought his arm might fly off. Gosh, I love the guy. "Jordan! Riley! You made it!" "There's no way to get lost in a place we come to annually," Riley joked. Evan threw an arm around my shoulder, squeezing so tight I complained. "Dude, you missed me, admit it. Don't worry, I'll give you tons of love and make you eat lots of snow. We saw each other 2 weeks ago." "Exactly!" He released me to make a dramatic sweep of the lobby. "It's been too long. You're lucky I survived this pain." I shook my head, laughing. Riley nudged me, grinning. "This is why we keep him around. Instant serotonin. And also instant chaos," I muttered when he started rambling about the plans for an epic snowball fight. "And you're pretty ready for it, Mr. I Need 3 Gloves." "Fair, but I'm not responsible for bringing your entire closet," I argued, but she waved me off with a laugh. "Save the bickering for the slopes," Evan teased, already zipping up his jacket. I was about to reply, but Evan cut me off with an exaggerated wink before turning his attention to the door. That's when I saw him. Blake. He came from the lobby bathroom with his usual irritating confidence. His tailored khakis and ridiculous moccasins belonged in some winter fashion catalog. I groaned. "Of course he's here." "Who?" Riley asked, glancing around. "Blake," I muttered. "Your mortal enemy / unofficial crush comes every year. I don't know why you act surprised." "Don't start," I warned, but it was too late. Blake spotted me and sauntered over, his signature smirk already in place. "Jordan," he said, dragging out my name like it was a personal joke. His gaze flicked to my paperwork, zeroing on my room number. 314, huh? Looks like we're neighbors." I groaned. Great, just what I need. Constant noise. "Relax," he said, leaning casually against the counter. "I'll try to keep it down. Can't make any promises about the sound of me winning, though." "Oh, please," I deadpanned. "If anyone's winning, it's me. You can eat my snow." Blake's grin widened, clearly enjoying himself. "Big talk for someone who's always in second place." I opened my mouth to retort, but Riley intervened, stepping between us with a pointed look. "Okay, boys, save it for the slopes. We've got unpacking to do." Evan reappeared at that moment, bouncing like he'd had 6 espressos. "Forget unpacking. We're hitting the snow now. No excuses." "Evan, some of us need 5 minutes to breathe," Riley said, pulling on her gloves. "And we're not dressed yet." "Breathing's for quitters," Evan declared. "But I'll allow you to change. Don't take too long, or I'll go after you all." Riley sighed. "Why do we let him plan these trips again?" "Because he's hard to say no to," I said. "Well, let's go change." There was nothing else but obey. Once we finished, I was already outside, the snow clothes making me warm enough not to complain about the weather. It was a bit windy, but not enough to stop them. "That's right," Evan screamed and jumped on the snow. His playful spirit was the glue that held us together all these years. All our parents are friends, and we used to go to the same school. At university, we got separated, but we still have this trip to make up for it. Riley touched my arm, and I smiled. "I know you want to build a snowman." Will you let me, or will you stop me and let me freeze to death while an evil and ridiculous redhead know-it-all tricks me into gaining my country? She giggled. You watch too many movies. She laughed. That's a classic. Yeah, I mumbled. The sun was bright enough to make the snow painfully white, and its location in the sky meant we had about 2 hours to play. I adjusted my gloves, pulling them tighter, watching Blake a few paces ahead. He looks annoyingly calm, like he owns the mountain. Then, without so much as a glance back, he pushes off down the slope near us, slicing through the snow with ridiculous ease. My competitive instincts flared. The sting of the chilly air hit my face as I pushed off, right behind Blake, feeling the rush of speed. The sun sparkled off the snow, so bright it was almost blinding, but it only made his confidence shine sharper. His skis carved through the snow like it was the easiest thing in the world, and his movements were smooth and effortless, like grabbing a glass of water from the fridge. It was always like this. Every time I saw him being him, and I hated it. I adjusted my scarf higher over my face, trying to block the biting cold, and maybe the view of his smug grin. Riley nudged me, her voice teasing. You're staring. I'm not staring, I shot back quickly. Uh-huh, she smirked. Are you going to let Blake show you up? Or do I need to step in and save your pride? I groaned. He's been showing off since we were kids. This isn't new. Blake glanced over his shoulder, his eyes locking on mine for a split second before he smirked, cocky as ever. He pushed off harder, his skis slicing through the snow like a knife through butter. His grin was a challenge, and it hit me like a spark to dry wood. That's it, I muttered, adrenaline flooding my veins. By the time I reached the finish line, he was already there, throwing his arms up like he was some champion. He was wearing that smug grin I couldn't stand. Guess you're still eating my snow, huh, Jordan? He says, the smirk in full force. I met his gaze, my voice calm and tight. Enjoy it while you can. Next round's mine. His eyes light up with a challenge. Bring it on. I like the fire. I leaned a little closer, our gazes locked, and then I whispered with a condescending tone, just like his. Keep it up, and you'll get burned. He laughed loudly, an amused sound that set my teeth on the edge together with something else, like he was trying to figure me out. It lingers between us, heavy and unspoken, even as we line up again for the next run. My pulse races, and I'm more determined than ever to knock that cocky grin off his face finally. Easy, boys, Riley says. Do I have to call Mommy to sort this out like when we were 10? See you down there, Evan joined before I could respond to her, preparing his ski board. Last one there will buy us drinks. Bye! He jumped off the cliff, and I could hear Riley cursing him while adjusting their equipment. I blinked, and Blake was going down too, but I stayed to talk to Riley. All good there? Go, I know how much you hate to lose to that guy, she said. You're the best friend ever, you know it? I giggled as I moved my body in the right direction. You better give me a really good Christmas present, I heard her scream while my body slid down the snow as if I belonged there. Soon I caught them up, and we flew down the slope, laughing and shouting like teenagers without responsibilities, jobs, or other adult things. That felt so good that my heart warmed up completely. The wind rushed past as we raced down the slope, Evan leading with wild speed and throwing playful insults. Riley, cursing his antics, couldn't resist joining the fun, and they raced side by side, laughing. Blake stayed close, his presence a silent challenge that pushed me to go faster. We reached a clearing of untouched snow, and Evan yelled, "Snowball fight!" Chaos erupted as snowballs flew. Riley hit Evan, and I dodged one before Blake nailed me. Cheat move, I said, throwing one back. Just keeping you sharp, he teased, grinning. Then the wind turned fierce, chilling us to the bone. The air felt heavier, and the wind picked up, biting colder than before. Riley glanced up, her smile fading as she took in the sudden change in the sky. Guys, we might want to head back. This is kinda nasty, she commented. Evan laughed softly, visibly worried about trying to smooth it all up. It's gonna be a horror movie. I ain't going to die here today, she said. Dark clouds rolled in fast, and a tense silence fell over our group. The air shifted, an eerie calm right before the storm. Yeah, they're right. We should go before this thing hits us, I said, and started moving up the hill. We were too far from the chairlift, so it was best to walk up. That cliff was not that far from the hotel. The storm came faster than we expected, catching us off guard. Wind howled, snow whipped into our faces, and everything around us disappeared into a wall of white. Evan shouted something, but the gale swallowed his words. I spun around searching for Riley, but I lost her in the chaos. The others vanished too, leaving just Blake and me in the middle of the storm. I could barely see him, but the sight of him was enough to steady my growing panic. "Where'd they go?" Blake shouted, his voice barely cutting through the storm. "I don't know," I yelled back, my throat tightening with fear. The slope's edge disappeared in the swirling snow. It was just us and the relentless wind. Blake grabbed my arm, his grip firm despite the biting cold. "We can't stay here. We'll freeze," he said, steady even in the chaos. "Come on, we'll head down together. They'll be fine. They know what they're doing." I swallowed my fear and nodded, letting him guide me. His hands stayed on my arm as we trudged through the storm. Every step grew harder as the snow deepened and the cold bit through our layers. My mind spun. Part of me was terrified about the situation, and another part was hyper-aware of Blake beside me. "Don't slow down now, Jordan," Blake said, looking back at me. His sharp gaze cut through the snow like it was daring me to keep up. "Even a storm like this can't make you act decent, huh?" I shot back, trying to match his teasing tone. He grinned. "Wouldn't want to break character." The storm worsened, and each step became a fight. Finally, through the white haze, I spotted a tree line. Relief surged through me as we angled toward it, hoping for some shelter. By the time we reached the trees, the wind still roared, but at least the branches offered some protection. Blake leaned against a tree, his face barely visible under his frost-covered hood. "Well," he said, that familiar glint in his eyes, "guess this happens when you complain too much." I rolled my eyes. "Find us a way back, Mr. Mountain Expert." "Sure," he said, rubbing his gloves for warmth. "But you owe me a victory lap once we're out of this." Before I could retort, Blake's foot caught on something hidden under the snow. He stumbled, falling hard. "Blake!" I hurried to his side. He grimaced, clutching his ankle as he tried to stand, but the pain made him wince. "Yeah, not good," he muttered, frustration clear in his voice. "Great," I said, crossing my arms. "Now we're really stuck, thanks to you." He managed a tight grin. "Afraid I'm slowing you down, Mr. Serious?" "Obviously," I snapped, softening as I saw the pain in his face. "Can you walk?" He shook his head. "Not without help." I sighed, crouching down to help him up. "Fine, but don't lean too hard on me, or we're both eating snow." "Wouldn't dream of it," he said, smirking despite his discomfort. We trudged on, his arm around my shoulders, matching steps as best we could. The storm was relentless, each gust colder than the last, but Blake couldn't resist teasing me. "First time you ever helped me out. Maybe you're not as stiff as I thought." "Be grateful I'm not leaving you here," I muttered, focusing on the path ahead. "Oh, I'm grateful," he replied, his voice light despite the tension. Through the haze, a shape appeared, a cabin half buried in snow. Relief hit me like a wave. Shelter! Inside, the cabin was dark and cold, but it was something. I helped Blake to an old couch and started gathering sticks and anything else I could find for a fire. My hands trembled from the cold, but I finally got the lighter to work. Blake watched me silently before breaking the quiet. "Guess you think you're too good to talk to me now." I froze, his words hitting a nerve. "Too good?" I turned to face him, my frustration boiling over. "No, Blake, I just don't have time for your arrogance." He raised an eyebrow. "Arrogant, huh? Never thought that's how you saw me." "Oh, please," I said, focusing on the fire. "You've always acted like you're better than everyone." Blake leaned back, crossing his arms. "If you'd ever talked to me, you'd know I looked up to you back then." I stared at him, shocked. "Looked up to me?" "Yeah, you're always so distant, like you thought you were better than everyone else." His words cracked something in me. All this time, I thought he was trying to push me down. But maybe I'd been the one keeping him out. We sat in silence as the fire grew, its warmth cutting through the tension. After a while, I said, "I never forgot that race when we were kids. I thought we were a team. But you just left me behind. Blake looked at me, his face softer than I'd ever seen. It was just a dumb game to me, Jordan. I didn't know it hurt you. His words made my throat tighten. All those years of resentment felt so pointless now. Well, I said, my voice barely steady, maybe we both missed a lot. He nodded and we sat quietly, the fire crackling between us. For the record, Blake said after a while, I never hated you. I scoffed. Could have fooled me. He smiled, wrapping a dusty blanket around both of us. Yeah, well, I guess we both have been hiding things. For once, I didn't argue. Instead, I leaned into the warmth, letting the silence between us settle into something new. Something that felt a little like peace. The next morning. The storm had passed, leaving the cabin heavy with unsaid things. Morning light peeked in, but the tension between Blake and me lingered. I was tending to his swollen ankle, trying not to look at him too much. His usual sharpness was gone, replaced by a quiet vulnerability that left me off balance. When I touched his injury, he winced. It's not broken, I said, breaking the silence. That's good. We can head out once the sun melts some snow, he replied. I coughed, embarrassed by the proximity. Thanks for sticking around, he added softly. I didn't think you'd actually care. I hesitated, then admitted. Wish I could say I didn't care, but that'd be a lie. His face softened, almost like he'd been waiting for those words. For the first time in a while, it felt like we were on the same page, even though I didn't fully understand what that page was. After a long silence, Blake spoke again, his voice hesitant. Remember that dare game we used to play as kids? I said something back then, but I didn't mean to let it slip. I froze, sensing this was important. What do you mean? He glanced at the ceiling before continuing. I told everyone I had a crush on someone. Didn't mean for it to come out, especially not like that. My heart pounded. Everyone knew about that dare, but no one ever told me who it was about. It couldn't be me, right? Blake's eyes met mine, and I saw something raw and vulnerable in them. Yeah, he said, his voice quieter. You. My brain stalled. Wait, me? I whispered, barely able to say the words. He nodded. Yeah, I don't know when it happened, but yeah. Everything clicked. All our bickering, my weird obsession with getting his attention. It wasn't just annoyance. It was something deeper I didn't want to admit. Oh my God, I muttered, overwhelmed. Jordan? Blake's voice was hesitant, pulling me back to the moment. Wait, I'm thinking, I said quickly, trying to make sense of it all. The silence stretched, but I couldn't ignore the truth staring me in the face. Blake had liked me. Maybe I'd liked him too, without realizing it. Finally, I looked at him. His face was closer than I'd ever noticed, his eyes unexpectedly beautiful. Before I could think, I leaned in and touched his cheek. He started to say something, but I stopped him. Just let me see something. Then, I kissed him. It was like everything finally made sense. His lips were soft but firm, and when he kissed me back, I felt a rush so intense it was almost dizzying. Every nerve in my body lit up, and years of misunderstandings melted away. When we finally pulled back, both breathless, the world felt quieter. The fire a soft hum in the background. Blake's cheeks were flushed, and he gave me a tentative smile. That was unexpected, he said. Yeah, I admitted, my fingers still brushing his jaw. But not bad. For the first time, the silence between us wasn't awkward. It was full of possibilities. 1 hour later. Somehow, we stumbled into the hotel lobby. Blake's arm slung around my shoulders as I helped him limp inside. His ankle was swollen and throbbing, but he tried to play it cool, shrugging casually past the discomfort. I'm fine, he muttered, though his wince gave him away. No big deal. Riley was the first to notice us. Her concern sharp as she rushed over. What happened? Twisted my ankle, Blake said nonchalantly, attempting to brush it off. Slipped on a branch during the storm. No big deal. I rolled my eyes, unconvinced. Yeah, no big deal at all. Just hypothermia and a foot swollen like a melon. Blake smiled, masking his discomfort, but I could see through it. Evan, who had stepped in to play the role of the group's makeshift medic, knelt beside Blake, inspecting the swollen ankle with a furrowed brow. Good thing Jordan was there, Evan remarked, wrapping an ice pack around Blake's foot carefully. Otherwise, what was the plan? Crawling back? Blake smirked through the pain, wincing slightly as Evan tightened the bandage. I'd have managed. Jordan just wanted an excuse to drag me around. Yeah, because carrying you was the highlight of my weekend, I shot back, a grin breaking through despite the circumstances. You really should be more careful. We're in the middle of nowhere. If something serious happened, there's no hospital nearby, Riley said. Duly noted, Blake replied, his tone softened by his concern. The usual banter resumed as everyone packed up. The trip had been abruptly cut short due to Blake's injury. Yet, amidst the noise and quick movements, something had undeniably shifted between us. I couldn't help but notice Blake glancing at me more often than usual, his teasing remarks tempered with unexpected tenderness. His gaze lingered longer as if he was seeing me differently. He was still picking me up and making sarcastic remarks like he always did. But there was something softer in his eyes and voice now. I caught Riley glancing at us sometimes, and I knew she sensed it too. That tension. That whatever it was. I tried to keep things casual, joking around with Blake like usual, but I could feel my mind slipping back into that moment in the shelter, to how he'd looked at me, and what he'd said, and what we did. Blake smirked back at my jabs, but his gaze kept holding mine a beat longer than necessary, and honestly, it was messing with my head. After we finished packing up and sorting out the last of the gear, everyone started piling into their cars. I threw Blake's bags in his trunk, ignoring the dull ache in my chest as I realized that, for now, this would be goodbye. The weekend had thrown me off in more ways than I'd expected, and as much as I wanted things to return to normal, a part of me wasn't ready to let it end. Drive safely, I told Evan, who was now in charge of riding Blake's car and himself home. And you, I turned to Blake. Be careful. I'll manage, he said with a grin. Besides, if it gets bad, I can always call my designated chauffeur, right? I rolled my eyes, but felt that familiar warmth creep in. Yeah, well, just don't make a habit of it. For a second, it was like everyone else faded into the background. I wanted to say something, anything, but my mouth wouldn't cooperate. Jordan, we gotta go, Riley called from the driver's seat, breaking whatever spell had settled between us. I returned to reality, nodding to her and forcing myself to look away. Climbing into Riley's car, I shut the door with a finality that made something twist in my stomach. As we pulled away, I watched Blake in the rearview mirror, standing there with his hands in his pockets, watching us go. The ride was quiet for a while, Riley humming along to the radio as I leaned back in my seat, trying to sort out everything that had happened. My phone buzzed in my lap, and I glanced down, my pulse quickening when I saw Blake's name on the screen. Blake, I had fun. Well, minus the whole ankle situation. How about we grab a drink next weekend? A laugh slipped out before I could stop it, and Riley shot me a curious look. What's so funny? I just shook my head, a grin spreading across my face. I don't even know yet, I replied. It was true. I didn't know, but I was so into discovering everything we could do and be together. Blake was all mine now to play with. A week later. I stood in front of Blake's apartment door, shifting the bouquet of daisies in my hand. Showing up unannounced wasn't my thing, but the past few days of texting had thrown the rules between us out the window. Taking a deep breath, I knocked twice. The sound echoed loudly in the quiet hallway. Half a minute later, the door opened, and there he was, Blake, looking surprised. His messy hair and loose hoodie over sweatpants made him look oddly approachable. Jordan, he said, eyebrows raised. Didn't expect you here. It was impulsive, I admitted. I just wanted to check if you're not hobbling around on a broken leg or something. He chuckled. It's just a sprain. And the flowers? For you, I said, almost questioning myself. Cheer me up or apologize for dragging me through the snow? Both, I said sheepishly. I'll go now. Didn't mean to bother you. I waved and turned to leave, but he grabbed me by the collar. Where do you think you're going? Get in. I stepped inside. His apartment was cozier than I expected. Blanket draped over the couch, a mug of tea on the table. He hobbled back to the couch and gestured for me to sit. After a moment of hesitation, I took the chair across from him. How's the ankle? I asked. Not running marathons anytime soon, he said, smirking. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Nervous energy bubbled in my chest, so I tapped my fingers on my knees, glancing around the room. Remember when I broke my arm in 5th grade? I asked. Blake snorted. I told you not to try that jump. And I told you I'd land it, I shot back. Yeah, with your face. I laughed and tossed a pillow at him. You're supposed to comfort me, not roast me. Our laughter echoed through the room, warming the space between us. For a moment, it felt like old times, before life and grudges complicated everything. It's been a while since we hung out like this, Blake said. Yeah, I admitted. It's nice. He looked at me, his gaze steady and unreadable. We should do this more often. Properly, I mean, not just because I'm stuck on a couch. Properly? I echoed, caught off guard. Yeah, coffee, a movie, something good without blizzards or twisted ankles. His eyes softened, and I couldn't stop myself from smiling. I think I can fit you into my agenda soon. Blake rolled his eyes but grinned. Great, I'll wow you with my crutch walking skills. I stood, already feeling lighter. At the door, I hesitated. Before I could second-guess myself, I turned, grabbed his hoodie, and kissed him. He froze in surprise, but didn't pull away. Breaking the kiss, I opened the door. Looking forward to it. Just try not to trip over anything. His laugh followed me down the hallway, and I smiled the whole way home. For the first time in years, it felt like we weren't stuck in the past. We were moving towards something new, something real. A month later. I don't know when I started memorizing Blake. Maybe it was during a quiet morning at the coffee shop, watching him get lost in a book while nervously fiddling with the corner of his phone case. Or maybe it was at that music festival when he surprised me by knowing every word to some cheesy 90s pop song, laughing like the world didn't exist. I couldn't pinpoint the moment, but Blake always found something to catch me off guard, like that night by the lake where we used to race as kids. He stopped to skim a rock across the water, a small, wistful smile on his face as if he was seeing something only he could. That smile stayed with me for days. We weren't calling it anything, just spending time together. Unofficial dates without labels, late-night drives, spontaneous movies, revisiting old hangouts. But something had changed. I caught myself holding on to moments, noticing the little things, like the way he danced under streetlights or how he pulled me out of bed at 2 a.m. to stargaze. Still, there was always the other side, the last-minute text canceling plans, like tonight's. Hey, I'm sorry, but I need to rain check. Work's killing me. His excuses felt genuine, but the pattern gnawed at me. I'd be left half-dressed for whatever plan we made, wondering why he kept pulling back. Was it fear? Was it me? This time, I couldn't ignore the frustration bubbling inside. Without thinking, I found myself at his apartment, knocking harder than necessary. When he opened the door, his confusion was clear. Jordan? I thought I said— I know what you said, I interrupted, stepping inside. But we need to talk. Blake shut the door slowly, tension in his shoulders. Okay, what's going on? I crossed my arms, trying to stay calm. You keep bailing on me, I started. I get it, work happens. But it feels like whenever we start getting close, you pull away. If you don't want this, just say it. Blake flinched, his jaw tightening. That's not fair. You think I don't want this? I've been trying— Have you? I snapped, my frustration spilling over. Because it feels like I'm the only one putting myself out there. What are we even doing, Blake? What are we? His voice rose defensively. I'm scared, okay? You think I don't know how fragile this is? I'm terrified that if we label it, It'll fall apart like everything else in my life. His words hit me harder than I expected. I could see it in his eyes, the vulnerability, the fear, but I couldn't let go of my frustration. And I'm terrified of being in something with no structure, I countered. I'm all in, Blake. For you. But I need to know if you're in it too. Blake looked away, gripping the back of a chair like it was the only thing holding him together. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't respond, but then he spoke quietly. You're not the problem, he said. You're too important. I don't know how to do this. I stepped closer, my voice softening. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just tell me you're all in. Blake looked up, his eyes glassy with something raw. Slowly, he reached for my arm, his touch grounding me. I'm all in, he whispered. The words cracked something inside me, and all the walls I'd built around my doubts crumbled. I moved closer until there was no space between us. All in? I asked again. All in, he repeated, firmer this time. So be my boyfriend, I said, blunt but sincere. Blake laughed, the sound breaking the tension. I can't handle you, he teased, brushing his thumb across my cheek. You'll have to, I replied, my voice soft but steady. You're stuck with me now. He leaned in and kissed me, quick but full of promise. Good, he said, smiling, because I'm not going anywhere. In that moment, all my doubts disappeared, and even though I knew there would be challenges ahead, they could wait. For now, he was mine and I was his. When Evan and Riley found out Blake and I were officially dating, their reactions were priceless. Riley practically screamed to pull me into a tight hug, saying, Finally! I was waiting for you two to figure it out. Evan, on the other hand, just smirked and said, Took you long enough. It felt good knowing our friends were rooting for us all along. They've always been in our corner, and seeing their excitement made it feel even more real. Blake and I are still figuring things out, but for the first time, it feels like we're on the same page. We're happy, and I can't wait to see what's next for us. Whatever happens, I know we're in this together. The end. Now that they made up, will Blake be kind to himself and learn how to love Jordan entirely? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome.